Oh, how's it going, everybody? So, yeah, we had to talk about this one. So, we're back for another edition of All In. And I'm sure as you can see by the title, we had to talk about it eventually. We're going to do Metallica. That's right, because it's mandatory. So, a lot to talk about here in this video. So, I would say Metallica has to be the first major rock or metal band I really got into. So, I remember my first memories of hearing Metallica would be right about the time they released the single One. So, I would say a couple years before the Black Album dropped. And this is back when, like, mainstream, like, top 40 used to actually play rock. I remember hearing the song One on, like, the pop stations back in the day. And I thought it was a pretty cool song. And then I remember, like, a couple years ago, the Black Album had came out, and my brother had bought the tape. And, of course, that's when they really blew up. So, to tell you how far back I go listening to Metallica, that's right. Cassette tapes. Yeah, buddy. So, I remember, like, the Justice tape, my cousin, and be GMC's older brother, gave this copy to me to get me more into Metallica. And then a little bit later on, I went to Kmart and bought this copy of Kill 'Em All. And this copy here, probably circa 1991 or 92. Now, it was 92 because I remember riding in my dad's 92 Ford pickup and we popped this tape in the tape deck. So yeah, that's about how far back I go with listening to Metallica. And of course, like, other experiences, I did get to see them live twice in concert. So the first time it was like me and the Roy's boys. We drove all the way out to Columbus, which was like a 6-hour drive from here to the Buckeye Stadium. They did the Summer Sanitarium tour, and I think it was like right after Saint Anger had came out. They were promoting that album, and then it was like the next year in '04. Me, GMC, and a good buddy of ours named Graver. Shout out to you if you're watching. We all piled in my old Pontiac and drove down to D.C. to the MCI Center and saw them again with Godsmack opening. So, yeah, I definitely recommend seeing them live. I mean, yeah, the tickets are a little bit pricey, but damn worth it. So, I guess we're going to get into it here. So, All In Metallica. I listen to all the albums back to back to back to back, like I always do. This does include all original albums. It's going to include the cover album. And it can also include some EPs. Live albums, if I discuss them, it's very brief. And of course, like any live songs, it'll be like, if they're an original to the form. So, starting off, so, their discography spanned from Kill 'Em All, 1983, all the way to last year. They did 72 seasons in 2023. So here we got Kill 'Em All. And like I said, I remember first hearing it on the cassette copy. So you got Hit the Lights, The Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Jump in the Fire. And then they have the instrumental, Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth. And then after that you got Whiplash, Phantom Lord, No Remorse, Seek and Destroy, and Metal Militia. And after being used to hearing, like, the Black Album and even Justice for All, I remember hearing this for the first time, and I thought, holy shit, this is, like, different. Like, not in a bad way, but, I mean, it was, like, back when they first started. Like, they were, like, heavy metal was new back then, you know? Not many people knew how to take it. So, originally, they were going to call this Metal Up Your Ass, but the record company was not going to approve of it, so we ended up with Kill 'Em All. But yeah, damn good album. Love it. And then we move on the next year to 1984. We move on to Ride the Lightning. So here we start with Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Fade to Black, Trapped Under Ice, Escape, Creeping Death, and the Call of Cthulhu. And here I'm noticing when you get into their older albums, like at least in the 80s, they always have that instrumental. Whether it be the last song in the middle, but they always did this every album. Like they did this with the Call of Cthulhu. It was like the last song they did this with. But here you got Creeping Death was the single to it, but like I said, I never really heard this album until after I heard the Black Album and Injustice for All. Like these first three albums, it's kind of like I was kind of stepping backwards to hear the older stuff after I heard the Black Album. And then you kind of have like that slower song, like not really a ballad per se, but a little more mellow, like Fade to Black. Real good song. For Whom the Bell Tolls, love that song. So, yeah, damn good. Ride the Lightning. And then we move on to Master of Puppets in 1986. So here we start off with Battery, and I just love how, like, the intro starts off, like, real slow, and then it just kicks your ass. And then, you know, the next one we got Master of Puppets, the title track, The Thing That Should Not Be, Welcome Home Sanitarium, which would be kind of like the mellow track. And then we got Disposable Heroes, Leper Messiah, Orion, which is the instrumental for that album. And we end it with Damage Incorporated. And honestly, this is one of those albums that I didn't like it as much as the others at first, but it really, really grew on me. So, good solid album. Then we move on to Injustice for All in 1988. So here we start off with Black End, the title track, Injustice for All, Eye of the Beholder, and of course, their breakout track, One. Love that song. Then you got The Shortest Straw, Harvester of Sorrow, The Freight Ends of Sanity, and then here their instrumental is To Live Is to Die, and then you end with Dyer's Eve. And this is where their album started to get a little bit longer. Like this one clocks in at around, I would say like not quite 60 minutes, almost an hour. But this is where, it was in 1986, I believe, Cliff Burton died in a bus crash. So we ended up with Jason Newsted as bassist for this album. And of course, they did the Garage Days in between this and Master, which later shows up on Garage Inc. So yeah, Justice for All, damn good album. 80s Metallica, fucking awesome. So, we move on to the 90s, and we can't talk about early 90s Metallica without talking about this. The Black Album. The cover, I don't know, the cover was, I don't know, a little bland, but as far as, like, the music goes, like, you can't deny it. Like, Enter Sandman, which I often think it gets overplayed. Then you got Sad But True, Holier Than Thou. The Unforgiven, which is pretty good. That's the mellow cut from that one. Weather in My Room, Don't Tread on Me, Through the Never, Nothing Else Matters, A Wolf and Man, and The God That Failed, My Friend in Misery, and The Struggle Within. And, oh no, I think any of these songs could have been singles. But you think about it, this album brought Metallica to the mainstream. And I know people bash on it for having them sell out and whatnot. But the way I see it, if people never discovered this album, they never would have discovered, like, all the others before it, like Injustice for All, Master, Ride the Lightning, and Kill 'Em All. Like, there wouldn't have been as much exposure to their older stuff if it wasn't for this album, or even the albums after this, when you think about it. But like I said, my brother had this on cassette tape until the tape recorder ate it, and then he had to go buy another copy, so he purchased it twice. And then I later purchased the CD whenever I upgraded to a CD player, so... Yeah, I would call this an album for, like say if you're not really a rock fan, but you want to get introduced to rock, this would be a good one for, like, a starter rock kit, I guess you could say. But, yeah, can't go wrong. Black Album. And I noticed, like, I feel like all the singles are a little bit overplayed. I tend to gravitate more towards the deeper cuts on this. That's how good it is. But, so, Metallica had us waiting for a good 5 years after that album. But in the meantime, they did go on tour for a couple years, and they released this bad boy, Live Shit, Binge and Purge. And here we have 3 CD set, 3 VHS tape set. It consists of like 3 live shows recorded. One of them was recorded in '89 when they were promoting Injustice for All, and then the other 2 shows were recorded during whenever they were promoting the Black Album. So they were on tour till I would say probably '94, and then We were waiting for an album, just anticipating it. And then we come out with this, 1996's Load. So I remember like they did the world premiere of Until It Sleeps before they even released the album, and I remember hearing it and thinking, wow, this is quite mellow. Like, I was hoping it was a lot heavier, but still a good song. So they released the album, and then here you got Ain't My Bitch, 2x4, the House Jack Built, Until It Sleeps, King Nothing, which I like, Hero of the Day, another good one, Bleeding Me, Cure, Poor Twisted Me, Wasting My Hate, Mama Said, Torn Within, Ronnie, and The Outlaw Torn. And I mean, yeah, people give this one a lot of crap too, but all in all, a pretty good album. I don't like it as much as like all their 80s stuff, but again, kind of like a nostalgic time trip when I listen to it. I honestly haven't listened to it for a while until like recently, so it was pretty cool to go back and listen to it. So we move on to the 1997's Reload, which is basically a sequel to it. And basically everything from Load and Reload was from the same recording sessions. They just had more material, and a year later they released this album. So here we start off with Fuel, Give Me Fire. Love that song. The Memory Remains, The Devil's Dance, The Unforgiven 2. That's pretty cool how they did a sequel to The Unforgiven. Better Than You, Slither, Carpe Diem Baby, Bad Seed, Where the Wild Things Are, Prince Charming, Low Man's Lyric, Attitude, and Fixer with 3 X's. And I would say of these two albums, I like this one better. I feel like it's a little heavier. But, yeah, Load and Reload, not bad. And then, of course, I was buying, like, some of the singles and imports. So you got Fuel here. And then you got The Memory Remains. And The Unforgiven 2. So, we move on to 1998, and not really so much an original album, but a cover album, Garage Inc. And you could almost call this a compilation album too, on top of all that, because it is a 2-disc set. So the first disc would be all new covers from 1998. And then what they did with this too is they took a bunch of the old B-sides they did from before and compiled it onto disc 2. So on the new material from back then, you have Free Speech for the Dumb, you have It's Electric, that was Discharge, you have Sabre Cadaver, which was Black Sabbath, Turn the Page, which was Bob Seger, Die Die My Darling, which was the Misfits, you got Lover Man, you got Merciful Fate, which is like a Merciful Fate tribute, then you got Astronomy, Whiskey in the Jar, Tuesday's Gone, which was Leonard Skinner, and then you got The More I See. And then we move on to disc 2, like I said, older clips, older songs. So here we start off with Helpless, The Small Hours, The Wait, Crash Course in Brain Surgery, Les Caress, Green Hell, which was the Misfits. That was the Garage Days revisited 87 EP. They took and put it on here, which was pretty cool. And then we go back to 84 then with Am I Evil and I can't say it right. Blitzkrieg. There we go. And then we move on to B-sides and one-offs from like 88 to 91. So here we have Bread Fan and The Prince, which was from the Justice era. Then you got Stone Cold Crazy, which was from Queen. And then I could tell a story about this song, So What? Anti-New World lead cover. And then you got Killing Time. And then you got Motor Headache 95, which the last 4 tracks on disc 2, they actually covered Motorhead songs. So here they covered Overkill, Damage Case, Stone Dead Forever, and Too Late, Too Late. But going back to So What, I'll never forget it. So GMC's brother, my cousin, he had just got his driver's license. He had this old, I think it was like a 77 Camaro in brown. Just a stand. This is like a plain Jane straight 6 Camaro. But anyhow, of course, this is about the early 90s at this point, so he had the old tape deck. And I forget which song from the Black Album it was that he had as a single, but it was a B-side. And I remember, like, we were driving through Blairsville going, I fuck this, I fuck that. It's pretty cool. First time, I was like 11, 12 years old when I first heard that song. But anyhow, yeah, that was pretty funny. But yeah, Garage Inc., definitely good for the covers. I think Disc 2 was the best out of that compilation, just for the fact that it was like a nod to the old school. And of course, I got another one of the imports or singles, Turn the Page. So then we move on to 1999. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. We're still in 98. Die, Die, My Darling. That's another single. Now we move on to 99. So here we have S&M, which I'm really not going to... I didn't really listen to all this in the All In because most of it was already tracks that I've already heard. But it is worth discussing No Leaf Clover and Human, which those two songs are actually original to this album. And they never really did studio versions of those songs either. I mean, those two songs were exclusive to it. And Human never even was a single either. It was just, I think, it was just a random song that they did in the playlist. But No Leaf Clover, they have done that live ever since then. I think whenever we saw Metallica in DC, they had that in their playlist. But it was definitely a different take on Metallica as far as, like, you know, mixing classical music into it. I mean, not my favorite thing in the world, but, you know, it worked out. I didn't mind it. So, then we move on. It was 2000, they did I Disappear for the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack. And that was like the only real one-off song they did that was popular. Like, it was never on any of their original albums or any compilations or nothing. But it was the only soundtrack song they ever did, if it wasn't a soundtrack relating to them. So then we move on to 2003's Saint Anger. Yeah, and this one really got a lot of crap. And honestly, I can understand why. I didn't hate the album. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate the album, but I'm already going to tell you right now, this is my least favorite of the whole catalog. So, here you start off with Frantic, then you have the title track, Saint Anger, then you have Some Kind of Monster, Dirty Window, Invisible Kid, My World, Shoot Me Again, Sweet Amber, The Unnamed Feeling, Purify, and we end it with All Within My Hands. Now, I almost feel like this album sort of sounds like it's still in demo form. Like, they really didn't polish the recordings all that much with it. They just kind of left it raw. I mean, I guess it's all good and fine if you're like a new up-and-coming band just trying to get your word out, but if you listen to Some Kind of Monster, the single version, I think it actually sounds better than the album version of Some Kind of Monster. Just, I don't know, it's better produced in single form. I don't know why. And then they later on redid All Within My Hands as like a slower song when S&M2 came out, which proved to be more popular than this version of it. But here you have the singles Frantic, Saint Anger, Some Kind of Monster, and I do remember they released The Unnamed Feeling as a single, but I don't remember it being played on the radio that much, other than like on Mandatory Metallica. But I mean, no, I don't hate the album at all. I just feel like it could have been produced a little better. But I mean, aside from that, I mean, it's not bad. I know people give it a lot of hate. So then, of course, there's Some Kind of Monster EP. That's where the single version of that song came from. And here you just get a bunch of live tracks. We're not really going to discuss them. So then we move on to 2008. And we get this album, Death Magnetic. Now, I actually feel like this is a throwback to the old days here. Like, everything from, like, the sound of the music, even down to the logo. So, here we start off with That Was Just Your Life. Then we have The End of the Line, Broken, Beaten, Scarred, The Day That Never Comes, which was the breakout song to it, All Nightmare Long, Cyanide, The Unforgiven 3, The Judas Kiss, Suicide and Redemption, and My Apocalypse. So, this album here, they kind of really threw back to the old school just for the simple fact that they did an instrumental again. Like, Suicide and Redemption was that track. And it was, like, very heavy, very hard. This album here would almost fit in with the first four, I think. And, that's what they were really going for on this one. But, yeah, definitely a damn good album, especially for later era Metallica. Love it. And if you really love Death Magnetic, you'll love Beyond Magnetic. So this is the EP that came out 3 years afterwards in 2011. And all it is just leftover tracks from sessions they did during that recording session that never made the cut. So they put them on an EP like 3 years later. So here we have Hate Train, Just a Bullet Away, Hell and Back, and Rebel of Babylon. And, yeah, great songs, great extension to the album. If you love Death Magnetic, you'll love Beyond Magnetic, for sure. So then, we wait a few years, and we get this, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. So here they did this in a double album set. Well, in this case, it's a triple album set because it's a deluxe version. So what we have here is Hardwired, Atlas Arise, Now That We're Dead, Moth into the Flame, Dream No More, Halo on Fire, Confusion, Man Unkind, Here Comes Revenge, Am I Savage, Murder One, and Spit Out the Bone. And I don't know why they split it off into a 2-disc album, because you could fit it all on one disc. It clocked in at around 80 minutes long on the original album. But I guess maybe they did that for the sake of, like, selling the record. Since, like, at this point, vinyl was coming back, so I'm guessing they did that to put it on the record. But also, we have a third bonus disc that comes with a couple covers and a few live tracks. So, some pretty cool stuff right here. My favorite song on this... I do love Moth into the Flame. And... kind of an obscure one, Murder One. I like that song. And of course, you got Hardwired, which was the breakout track to this. But very cool cover. And then, moving on, we're into the COVID years. So here we have S&M 2. And not really much to talk about here because it's all songs we've previously heard, but just in S&M form again. But I think what they did here in this version of S&M is they covered a lot more of the newer era of Metallica that the first S&M couldn't cover, obviously. So this is where they released All Within My Hands as a single in this form. It was like a real slow song at that point where if you listen to All Within My Hands on Saint Anger, it was like real heavy, real grungy, real raw. But here they kind of like lightened it up a bit, so... But yeah, not much more to talk about since it's a live album. So then we move on to their latest and greatest release, 72 Seasons. It's kind of real neat how they did this too. Like they have the 72 kind of like cut out on there. But the one thing that's annoying is they don't really list the songs on the back. So you gotta fold all this out. Okay, they have it on the CD. So here we have 72 Seasons, Shadows Follow, Screaming Suicide, Sleepwalk My Life, You Must Burn, Lux Eterna, which was the breakout track to it, Crown of Barbed, Chasing Light, If Darkness Had a Sun, Too Far Gone, Room of Mirrors, and and we have Enamorata. And this one kind of throws me back more to the Black Album a little bit. Especially like the last track, it kind of reminds me of the song Misery. But yeah, all in all, damn good album. I love Lux Eterna. I think If Darkness Had a Sun, that would be my favorite track off this album. But yeah, it was actually kind of hard to find this on release day. Alright, so time to rank them. So we're going to do this in eras since they have 11 original studio albums. We'll say 12 and count Garage Inc. So 80s Metallica. So between those albums, I would say, and this was a tough decision too. But my favorite's going to have to go to Injustice for All. And, of course, Master of Puppets, very close second. And my least favorite would be Kill 'Em All. Moving on to 90s Metallica, I would say my favorite, Black Album. Least favorite, I would say Load. And then you move on, we're going to say 2000s and newer Metallica. We got 4 albums there. So, as far as my favorite goes, hands down, Death Magnetic. Just because it was sort of like a revisit to the past, is how they were like in the 80s. Least favorite, as I explained during the review of it, Saint Anger. I guess, just because of the raw production and everything of it, they could have like produced it a little bit better, but I don't hate any of them. And as far as my favorite all-time album, definitely Justice, for sure. Just because that's kind of how I got introduced to like the earlier era of Metallica. Something else I always thought that was unique about Metallica, at least in the past 20 years, is the fact that they record all their live shows. So, if any of you out there have attended a live show of theirs within the past 20 years, you can actually go on livemetallica.com and download it. And I did exactly that for the DC show in '04. But I wish more bands would actually do that, like actually release all their live shows, and then you could download the show and be like, yeah, I was there, that's fucking cool. And you can kind of like listen back at it, But yeah, like literally every show they did from '04 till now, like 20 years worth of shows, they're all on that site and you can download them. So I actually think that's a pretty unique feature that they do. That I don't know of any other band that does that. But anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this edition of All In featuring Metallica. So next video, is it wake up, put on a little makeup? Why did I leave my keys on the table? I don't know. Tune in next week.